Hey, welcome back to Best Bourbons of the Century so far. We're in the top 5. These are the best of the best, pound for pound, the best bourbons that have come out in the 21st century. Of course, at number 5, we had the beautiful Russell's Reserve 1998. And you heard Eddie Russell talk about how special that was, both to him personally and to the brand. And this one is also very, very important. At number 4, we have one that brings a tear to my eye every time I think about it.
Bourbons of the Century.
At number 4, Parker's Heritage Collection 11-year-old from 2017. Now, the reason why this one is so special is that this is the one that came out after Parker Beam died. Now, you've heard me talk a lot about Parker Beam and throughout this series. Parker Beam was near and dear to my heart. I've got along with all the other videos in the description section, I have an article that I wrote about him while he was battling ALS. He was just a great human being, a great palate, and one of the best distillers of all time. And I brought in to talk about Parker and the 11-year-old Parker's Heritage, Larry Cass, Bourbon Hall of Famer and the former communications director for Heaven Hill, also gave the eulogy for Parker at his funeral. So you're going to get to learn a lot about the whiskey and the man behind the whiskey in this interview with the great Larry Cass. And joining me now to talk about one of the top 5 coming in at number 4, the Parker's Heritage 11-year-old, is the great Larry Cass, retired from Heaven Hill, and he's a fellow South Park fan. How you doing, Larry?
All is well here at home with me and my dogs. So, yep, it's great to be with you, and congratulations on all your honors and kudos, and to think that I knew you when your ascot was only that big. It's an honor. So,
well, I appreciate that. You've always been very kind and very helpful to me in my career. And I'll say that whenever I wanted information, like, you would give me to the highest level of detail I could possibly want. And, for what I was trying to do 10, 15 years ago, that was not very common, not a lot of transparency in the business.
Yeah, in other words, I talk too much. That's what you're saying, right?
No, you were perfect.
No, I'm just kidding. You wouldn't be the first person. So, no, I truly loved, the cliche of a business of relationships is truly that, a cliche, but I loved working with and still staying in contact with you and all the writers that I ran across. You guys were an incredibly intelligent and fun bunch of people to be around, so I appreciate that greatly. So I'm a frustrated writer myself. So.
And I think the thing is too is, like, writers, we have a tendency to really not like PR people because they treat us like we are just a clip, or we're just a hit, or they don't really necessarily treat us like humans. That was always different with you. And if you thought some of my stuff was shit, you told me, and that's what I appreciated even more. So.
Oh, surely I never did that, but
not to that extent, no. But
no, and thank you very much. That's very kind. And of course, back when I started, there was but a small handful of people that wrote about whiskey. So it's great to see, lots of other great people, the category getting bigger and everything getting bigger along with it. So it's been a real great rocket ride.
And the reason why I wanted to have you on is because I know your affection for what came in at number 4 for my best bourbons of the century so far, and that's the Parker's Heritage, the 11-year-old that came out in 2017. So tell us about what that particular release meant to you and why you loved it so much.
Well, all the Parker's Heritage releases, of course, were true labors of love, and part of the reason that series is always so near and dear to me and to Linda, I think, and was to Parker, is that that was the time that we kind of said, okay, we need something that does two things. One, that's kind of celebrates Parker and who he is, against his will, mind you. He wasn't particularly in favor of that side of it, but I mean, as you know very well, Parker was a force in the distilling world, and was a never-ending source of inspiration and humor and all those other great things. So, the opportunity to kind of put his name on something was something that was a bit of a personal mission on mine and Josh and a lot of people at Heaven Hill's part. It's funny kind of when you think back, because there was a time when Parker's father was master distiller, when Jim Beam wouldn't even allow us to use Earl Beam's last name. And he was referred to in the materials as Mr. Earl. And I always kind of thought that just doesn't sound right, And I remember when we first started creating communications from Parker and newsletters and things like that, there was some talk about calling him Mr. Parker, and I said, my God, that sounds like a hairdresser. I don't want to do that. And so this kind of represented coming full circle, really putting Parker's name and everything about him kind of on the label. And so that was the first thing that was really great about Parker's Heritage. But the second thing, of course, from a whiskey lover standpoint, is that it allowed us to do really cool releases in limited numbers, so that we weren't constrained by, oh my God, we have to have 600 barrels of this to do it. I mean, it was, of course, the time when a lot of people were doing, cool limited edition releases. We weren't the first one to do it, certainly, but this was kind of our space in which we could do, extra aged and finished and all kinds of cool products. The first, 9 or 10 of which, of course, were done hand in hand with Parker. So the Parker's Heritage Collection, for those reasons, just was such a great product, and such a great product to work on for me and for the entire team at Heaven Hill, and I know for Parker and Linda as well. But this, the release that you're talking about, the number 11 release, of course, was the release that came out after Parker passed. And Parker had, of course, been, suffering with ALS for 6 years, I think, at that point. And as you know, as well as anybody, his passing, though it obviously didn't come as a surprise because he had ALS, but he never went through, quite the hell. He went through certainly some hell, but he didn't go through quite the hell, I would say, that a lot of people that have ALS and suffer for longer than he did and end up far more incapacitated than he did. Parker's passing was, of course, a shock to us all, but so this release really was all about that. It was all about the fact that Parker had passed, and what could we do in a line that, of course, had already had such great bottlings in it already, and it already reflected so much of Parker's character. But what could we do to further kind of capture Parker's, immortalize Parker in a way in this particular bottling? So we actually kind of went back to the basics on it, and for those of us that knew him quite well, as you did, Parker wasn't somebody that was shy about sharing his opinions about things. So we pretty much knew kind of where Parker's head was in terms of what kind of whiskey he loved best. I would say he loved them all, but perhaps what he loved best. The ages, the warehouse locations, all these types of things. So that's kind of where we went with this. Was we said kind of what would Parker, what was the essence of Parker? What types of whiskeys did he love, and how could we, as best as we could, kind of put those together in this edition for him? So we went with an age. Parker always loved that 10, 11-year-old age. He always, back in the day, he when we didn't really have any of these super premium brands, when really all we had was was Evan Williams 1783. He always loved 1783 because it was a 10-year-old back then, and it was a great age. And so he's always just kind of loved that age. And the Evan Williams single barrel, of course, is around that age. And he also, of course, loved the way the warehouses in Deatsville aged whiskey. We had done another release that had come from Deatsville warehouses, and as you know, you've been in them before, and they're we've got a few of them. Makers have got a few of them, and they're great old tiered warehouses in a beautiful location that gets tons of sunshine and lots of great ventilation, and they're just beautiful warehouses. So we always knew he loved the whiskey that was kind of drawn from those middle to upper floors, not too high, but they had those little cupolas on those where you could really get some crazy aging going on. But he loved those warehouses, so that was kind of where we went with it. And a single barrel, of course, was kind of a nod to the fact that he was the one that started all the single barrels with Heaven Hill, with Evan Williams single barrel, Henry McKenna single barrel, and Elijah Craig single barrel back in the day. And so a single barrel, 11 years old in this instance because it was the 11 edition of Parker's from Deatsville, seemed like about the right thing to do, and we released it at a nice high barrel proof, and so it just kind of clicked all the buttons that, again, without Parker being there, that we thought Parker would look down and say, "Damn, that's how I like a bourbon." So that was kind of our goal in this, and as I said, they all were missions of love, but this one in particular, having just lost Parker, kind of took on a very special meaning for all of us. So that kind of was the thought process behind this one. Of course, Parker's, these are aged products, very aged products, sometimes finished products. So generally, the pipeline on these is, we try and be quite a number of releases ahead on them, because they require, planning. They're not huge releases, but we want to make sure that we have, a number of barrels available just how we want them. So, but this one, Parker's, death obviously came as a shock to us. So we had to kind of move a little quicker on this one, perhaps, than on some of the other ones. So, but again, the way Parker liked his bourbon was a fairly, tight box there, and it was not something that we had to go too crazily deep in the inventories for, and we were able to come up with. So a particular labor of love, as I said.
It's interesting. I fell in love with this release, really, because of the whiskey, and I don't think we'd ever had this conversation about the time from when he passed to the creation of it, and like how you all kind of planned around that. I mean, I knew it was in his honor, of course, but I didn't know you all went to those details. And
yeah, that was kind of the idea behind this one, was very much kind of Parker's favorite things. I think that was literally our kind of little joke about it at the time. That's what we were trying to capture with this release was, these are the basic aging regimens that and mash bill and all those things that Parker did for, frankly, his first 40 years at the company, thereabouts, and really was very comfortable with and loved a lot. And so that really was the kind of the idea behind it. So yeah, happy to enlighten you.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear, and for everybody who's not had the chance to learn about Parker Beam, please, in my description, I'll have the story I wrote about him and his final days in his obituary. So please check that out, because Parker meant a lot to both of us, and I know you've got a lot of good stories. Is there a good story on Parker you'd like to share?
There's almost an embarrassment of riches with Parker stories. He there's a lot of stories, but I'll tell you, Parker used to my favorite stories that Parker used to tell were really stories that he would tell about his family, and in particular trips he would take with Booker and Baker and David Beam, and what quite a crew, as you can imagine. You know,
Right.
you basically got like 12,000 years worth of bourbon expertise there, and just a bunch of great guys, and as down to earth guys as you will ever see. And so he used to tell some great stories about going away with them, and they always would involve, as he would put it, a snootful at some point. But here's a kind of a funny story that he would tell that kind of ties back in with Parker and my interaction with Parker. Parker, you may have heard him tell the story, but he would tell a story about one time when they went, I think it was in the Gulf Coast somewhere, fishing with Booker and Baker and David, and they went with a fellow that they called Hudson, and he said, we got out the boat, we all had a little bit of bourbon with us, and so we had a few drinks on the way out, and we get out and we start fishing, and he said poor Hudson just starts turning just as green as can be, and poor Hudson just starts throwing up over the rail, and everywhere where Hudson is throwing up, people are catching fish. So pretty soon Booker's yelling, "Hey Hudson, come over here and throw up," and David's, "No, Hudson, come here and throw up." So apparently, it's chumming. I don't know what it was, but the funny little twist on this is, when Parker passed, you were there. I was, one of the great honors of my life was I delivered the eulogy for Parker, and I was outside the church and talking to people, and somebody comes up to me, an older gentleman, and puts out his hand and say, "Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm an old friend of Parker's. My name is Hudson." And it was all I could do to just not start screaming out, "Hey Hudson, throw up over here!" It was just but he was such a great guy, and I knew he was a dear friend of Parker and Linda's, and so, but and he told all kinds of great stories about traveling, particularly with Booker, you can imagine. So someday maybe I will. Someday maybe I'll write a book about him. But he's got tons of great stories, and maybe some other time we'll get together and I'll trade some more with you. But yeah, Parker was, I don't know if a father figure was quite right. He was like the greatest uncle figure you could ever have, maybe, for me, because we had too much fun together, I think, to really say he was a father figure. But I miss him every day, and of course I'm still in contact with Linda, and so Parker lives on forever in all of our hearts. So.
And I think a great measure of a man, especially after we leave this earth, is how people, speak of them, and he's one of the greatest people that I've ever shaken hands with, and it had nothing to do with the whiskey he made. It was just the human being he was. And
absolutely, and you'll remember this, but I actually happen to have. Excuse me. Yeah. This is actually a one of the maybe last bottles of the Parker's Unity that we did. When of course with he and Linda's cooperation and permission, told the world what was going on with him and how he was going to kind of put all of his energy and efforts into the fight against ALS, and that's when we finally had the chance to do this great project that ever since I saw Black Bottle in Isla, I always wanted to do something where all the distilleries got to do something together. So we did the Parker's Unity in Parker's honor, and that directly, I think, speaks to what you're talking about. I mean, it's a small world to begin with, and it's a very, very small world in the whiskey business. And for the 40 or 50 years where Parker and Booker and Elmer and Jim and everybody else was making whiskey, it was a very small world, and of course it wasn't a world of rock stars. It was a world of working men, and so you are absolutely right. The measure of somebody is kind of the the friends you leave and the ones that love you and the relationships you make. And there's no greater tribute to Parker than that. I mean, everybody loved and misses Parker tremendously. So, and so do my dogs. So do my dogs.
I bet they did. You probably came with treats.
You're right, exactly. They're celebrating a little early, so.
Well, Larry, thanks for coming on and for sharing your memories of Parker and how special this 11-year-old release was. And
well, I'm happy to do it. And on behalf of Heaven Hill, I should say, thanks so much for including not only this, but I know a couple of other whiskeys in your top list. And it's been a pleasure to work with you all the years and really to watch you kind of ascend to the heights that you've gone to. But yeah, it's particularly an honor, I think, for this whiskey and given your relationship with Parker and Linda that it is in the top 5. And I can say nothing but thank you on behalf of Heaven Hill and Parker and Linda. So.
Absolutely. And it's with that I say that, it wouldn't be on this list if it wasn't great whiskey, and the man who made it was also great. So
absolutely.
It's just always a pleasure to chat with you. And I'm going to, need to see what was his name again? The throw up guy. What was his name?
Hudson.
I got to find Hudson.
Yeah. I should, I'm gonna get yelled at for now. His first name was Bill Hudson. It was his last name. And
okay.
Darn it, I'm on the spot here, and I'm just not coming up with his Jim Hudson maybe.
I got a fishing trip I'm going on. I need to find this guy because I haven't been lucky this year.
Apparently, his dietary habits are much to the liking of the game fish. So yeah, seek him out. So.
All right, my friend. Well, be safe out there, and I look forward to chatting soon.
You too, Fred. Be well. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.